Good morning. This is day 2 of our Preemie tutorials. So far we've gotten the blue undertones, the veins, the purple mottling, and the red mottling. Today I'm going to try to take these a few steps farther, see how far we can get on them. These two need to warm up a little bit. You can see the difference in their vinyl. They are very, very white looking compared to little Maya. So my first step that I'm going to do, Maya's going to sit aside for this step because she's already nice and warm. But Caleb and Promise are going to get a yellow wash right now. And for this wash, I have my yellow jar. And again, I use a different jar for every color that I use, so I have about 10 jars. I use the same paint over and over. If it dries out a little bit, I just add thinner and it will reconstitute. If it gets to the point where it's gritty, I wipe it completely clean and start over. So I just added some thinner. And the color paint I like to use for this is called Yellow Ochre. It's kind of a yellowy brown color. I used to use the bright yellow, and it's okay to use this, but it's a lot easier to screw up the color when you have such a bright yellow. So I only use this for fantasy colors, or if I need just a little bit right across the nose towards the end. But reality says that this color works the same. So I have a bunch of this, but I don't use it very much unless I'm doing a fantasy kit. So I've gone to this color. Again, this is Yellow Ochre. I have my yellow paintbrush that I use to reconstitute the paints and mix it. I'm just going to slap it around in there and get some paint out. I never chisel any paint out of the jars. Like if you're a traditional artist and you use paints, what you normally would do is scrape out a chunk and then mix it. I never do that because it's too much paint. So you just let the paintbrush fill up with the paint as it swirls around and then add it to the jar that way. That allows extra liquids to stay in your paints and help keep them hydrated. So the texture I'm looking for is kind of a thick, milky type of a texture. Thicker than the reds, about the same as the purples. And then I'm going to use 2 of these sponges, the Wonder Wedgie sponges. These are my wash sponges. They allow me to do the washes without having it so dense and thick that it like wipes the paint off. So one of them is going to put the paint on, and the other one is going to take the excess paint back off. Again, I'm going to tip it up on my jar so I have access to the driest stuff. I'm going to dip it in, just into the driest stuff, and then I will start expanding it and kind of spreading it, pouncing it, never wipe, always gently pounce. When you wipe it, the friction may or may not take off under layers if they weren't properly cooked. These babies were cooked yesterday with the first 4 layers on. Today they will be cooked a few times as well with the different layers that they're getting. I always swirl around my paints in the jar after each layer so that I don't have a super thick clot or a super watery clot. You can already see the warmth that it's providing to this little white kit. Like it's giving it a nice warm skin tone, matching my skin more generally. Alright, so there it's on. Now I'm going to take my second sponge and I'm going to gently pounce it again. And this just takes off any excess paint so it doesn't pool and puddle and leave yellow splotchy spots on the kit. You see the yellow spot there? If I didn't come back over and pounce that, that would have been a mark on the vinyl that you'd have to figure out how to get rid of later. Okay, so already one of these washes has brought her a little bit closer to Maya's coloring. I'll set her aside so she can dry. Now Caleb, I'm going to go back to my wash sponge. He's already started out to be a warmer color, so it won't need as many layers of this. Promise might need 2 layers to get her to the right color, but we'll do 1 layer at a time and go from there. And definitely try not to touch the wet paint. Just the pressure of your hands grabbing it may wipe it off. This is when your paint is the most fragile, when you have wet layers sitting on top of cooked layers. Even though your layers are cooked, it can, with enough friction, be wiped right back off. All right, so we're going to come back with our drier one and go over it again. Again, always pounce, never wipe. And it doesn't have to be crazy, heavy, forceful pouncing, just light, gentle pouncing. Okay, so now they're getting closer to the same colors. We'll go through all their limbs, and then after this layer, I'm going to actually cook these 2 again so that they're caught up to the same layer as this little nugget, and then we'll go on to a red wash. So I'll come back with the red wash after this. I'll do it on the hands so you can see on the hands. The hands and the feet you have to be careful around the creases. Because of their deep lines, they just generally collect more liquid. So for these guys, I always do the hand or the foot first, and then I come back and pounce one area at a time. And this allows me to have more control over the brush. Get in those little creases so that they don't pool up when you're not looking. Okay, so I'll do a foot now. All right. Always make sure you try to get every single piece in part so that nothing looks like it's naked of color when you're done with it. And all the little toe creases. And this isn't a race, so don't try to rush through it, just to be fast. This is art, so you have to do your best. Now these yellow sponges, this is a single-use thing. As soon as I'm done with these 2 layers, this yellow sponge will be thrown away because it will start to dissolve and kind of fall apart in the next project. So instead of having to pick pieces and parts off the next baby by keeping it, I just toss it out. I guess I'm a bit wasteful that way, but I haven't found anything that applies it as smoothly that doesn't fall apart. So I'm just going to stick with that and waste a sponge every few dolls that I do. I always try to make them in pairs of 3 because I can be cooking one, cooling one, and doing details on a 3rd one when they get to the next step. So the first steps of getting their skin tones, they all kind of go along at the same time, but at the end, when they are getting their details, one kit will be being made while the other kit is cooking or cooling, and the 3rd kit will be doing the opposite, the cooking or the cooling. So it just kind of keeps me busy. I don't really like being idle and wasting time. So 3 for me is my max, and I like to do them in size ranges. If I'm doing 3 little ones, I like to do 3 little ones. If I'm doing 2 big and a little, then that usually ends up leaving somebody behind because the size is so strange. So for me, I like to just do them in sizes. If I'm doing a really huge one, then I can throw a tiny one in just because the huge ones take twice as long as a normal one anyway. All right, so this is, you can see the color details on here on all these little limbs. This one and this one have been yellowed to match these four. You can already kind of see that they're starting to match. These ones will get caught up here and then while the video's off, and then I'll come back to you with the red wash.